Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Initiate Youth Talks. My name is Csinszka, and I'm the host of this series where I've been talking to amazing young energy professionals from both Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And we've been talking about policies, technologies, and business models that can be applied to the energy transition in Eastern Europe, and also best practices that can be imported from the West. Unfortunately, this interview series is coming slowly to an end, but I'm still talking to Vicky today. Vicky is from Slovakia, and she's studying at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, where she's researching energy innovation, energy policy. But yeah, she's going to tell us a lot more about that. Welcome, Vicky.
Hi, Csinszka.
Hi, Vicky. I'm very glad to have you here today. We know each other via our East Meets West network, where you represent Slovakia. And right now you are writing your PhD on energy innovation and policy in the Central Eastern European region, which I'd love to hear more about. But first, please tell us a little bit more about your studies, your research, and how you got to Hong Kong from Slovakia.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to share my research on clean energy transition. So in terms of my studies, my educational journey started at the University of Edinburgh, where I was studying ecological and environmental sciences. I was engaged with various research projects related to energy technology. Later, I did an exchange year at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. And from there, everything naturally led to Hong Kong, where I'm currently doing my PhD at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I found out that there is a newly formed department called Division of Public Policy, and they are specializing in many policy areas that are of my main interest, such as environmental policy, energy policy, sustainability, and innovation policy. So during my PhD studies, I have been working on three main projects. And the first one is related, I was struck by the fact that Hong Kong has adopted the feed-in tariff policy relatively late in 2018, while many other countries have done so much earlier in 1990s, 2000s, etc. And so basically, in my first research project, I was trying to understand what drives different governments to adopt these renewable energy policies. Is it domestic factors or international factors? For my second project, I look into the type of policy instruments and policies that small OECD countries have used to support sustainability and innovation in sustainability. So we have collected a huge data set of about 1,700 policy instruments, and we were looking at 5 different sectors that are related to sustainability, such as energy, water, health, manufacturing, and agriculture. And lastly, my third research project, which is probably also the most interesting one for this interview, is where I was researching the Visegrad 4 countries. And the Visegrad 4 countries are Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Poland. And I am trying to understand what type of policies and policy instruments the governments of these countries use to support the clean energy transition. So I analyze policy documents and websites of these governments to see what they are doing. And in terms of all 3 of these projects, I believe that there are many policy lessons that can be learned.
Surely. Thank you, Vicky. Now, a little follow-up question on one of your studies. So it's interesting that you also looked at energy policy in Hong Kong as well as in Central Eastern Europe. I wonder if there are some interesting differences that you can share in terms of, for example, the policymaking or the functioning of markets when looking at Hong Kong or Asia versus countries in Central Eastern Europe. And what are the drivers for policy adoption in these countries?
So in terms of the drivers, I was specifically looking at 2 policies, the feed-in tariffs and renewable portfolio standards, and I was trying to understand what drives the adoption of these policies in various countries. And I found that it's actually a mix of both domestic and international factors. So, for example, in terms of domestic factors, higher economic development, or the more democratic political regime, but also higher CO2 emissions, are more likely to make countries adopt these policies. And in terms of international factors, what's very interesting is that being close to other countries that have already adopted these policies has an important effect on adoption in the other countries. So as a main conclusion, I think renewable energy policy in one country has an effect on the policy making in other countries. So there is definitely potential for learning between countries on top of just considering their own domestic factors when making these decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed, it's an interesting spillover effect. Now, as a follow-up in your other study on the Visegrad 4, what do you expect as preliminary result of this study on the Visegrad 4 and on the role of governments in public policy and clean energy technology innovation?
So in terms of the Visegrad 4 countries project, I was looking at government documents, government policies, government websites, and I was collecting the policies and policy instruments that they have used in the past decade to support energy transition. And I was really looking at the whole process from all the way from knowledge development all the way to technology adoption. So the supply side policies as well as the demand side policies. And the reason why I'm saying this, it's important because many of the previous studies have only looked at supply side or demand side policies and never really considered it as being a whole process. So I found that these countries had or used about 240 policies or policy instruments. And I think one of the most interesting results, at least the most interesting one for me, is that Poland and the Czech Republic had much more programs and funding that supports applied and strategic research, but also demonstrations and pilots compared to Hungary and Slovakia, where these programs are rarely targeted at the energy sector. So in terms of all types of policies, this is where I actually found the largest gap between these two sets of countries. And one reason why this could be happening is that I think that it's much more urgent for Poland and the Czech Republic to diversify their energy portfolio because they are very heavily reliant on coal. While Slovakia and Hungary are much more reliant on natural gas and nuclear energy, which are much lower carbon sources. And the second major finding is that all four countries, they mainly focus on the demand side policies. So they are really supporting technology adoption. And this is, for example, energy efficiency technologies or renewable energy technologies. However, this is in contrast with my findings in the OECD project, where I looked at very quite innovative countries such as Switzerland and Sweden. And there I found that countries support both supply side and demand side policies to a very similar extent. However, this is not the case for the Visegrad 4 countries. So I think this is definitely somewhere where these countries could improve if they want to also be more innovative and support the clean energy transition even more.
Thanks a lot, Vicky, for the insights into your research. Now, I wonder if you can share a few words about your home country and how the energy transition is going in Slovakia.
Yes, definitely. So in Slovakia, the total energy supply features a balanced share of fossil fuels, but also nuclear energy. Slovakia has currently 4 nuclear reactors, which are generating half of its electricity, and there are 2 reactors under construction. In 2019, the share of renewables in final energy consumption was at about 16.9% in Slovakia, which has already surpassed its target of 14%, in line with the national target set by the EU directive for 2020. And the new target for renewable energy is 19.2% by 2030. However, given the Fit for 55 package, I would expect that Slovakia, as also many other countries, have to increase these targets. In terms of which technologies or sources make up the biggest share of renewable energy, it's hydropower in Slovakia, followed by biomass, and then to a smaller extent, solar energy. And so unfortunately in Slovakia, state support has always been the main driver for the development of renewable energy sources. Up until the year of 2018, renewable energy generation has been mostly supported via feed-in tariffs. And feed-in tariffs basically provide renewable energy generators with a fixed price for the energy they produce for a fixed number of years. In the first year, when the policy came to force, the prices were set too high, so which led to all sorts of problems, such as there was suddenly oversubscription for this state support, and then, for example, prices of electricity for consumers increased, etc. However, this is not very specific only for Slovakia, because this has also happened in many other countries where they use the feed-in tariffs. And during this period, during the last decade, the development of renewable energy sources was also obstructed by distribution companies that were very reluctant to connect a new renewable energy facilities. And basically, they were arguing that the national grid does not really have sufficient capacity. However, in 2020, the Renewable Energy Sources Act has been amended, and new rules introduced a new feed-in premium assigned via auctions. And basically, feed-in premiums are much more market-oriented, especially when they are coupled with auctions, because they guarantee a premium price on top of the market price. However, in terms of this new legislation, there are still some problems that may hinder the process of adopting these renewable energy technologies. But to me, this time it really seems like the Ministry of Economy is keen to actually support the development of renewables. So hopefully it's going to go well.
Yes, fingers crossed, especially, always fingers crossed for Eastern Europe and the Visegrad 4, because changes need to happen. Thank you, Vicky. We're getting to my last bonus question, which is if you have a favorite technology or policy tool in the energy transition which you prefer and which you think maybe is specifically applicable to Slovakia or Eastern Europe.
So I guess my opinion is going to sound pretty biased, given that I've done so much research on the feed-in tariff, but I think it's the feed-in tariffs. I think they're just brilliant because they are quite simple, but they are also very sector energy specific. So they have been adopted by many, many countries, and the feed-in tariffs played a very important role in the adoption and expansion of renewable energy technologies, especially solar PVs and wind energy. It has also brought down technology prices, has been driving technological development, and it has also made these types of technologies much more acceptable societally. So I think this policy in general has been a great first step in terms of renewables expansion and energy transition. But of course, we need to go further and adjust policies according to the stage that we are at. So right now, it may very much be the time to actually move to more hybrid models, such as Slovakia has done with the feed-in premiums assigned via auctions, or auctions that are able to respond to market signals more easily.
Surely. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for this very nice policy discussion. I hope that others will also learn a lot from it, and I wish you good luck with your research in the coming years. And I hope there will be some more interesting results that you can share with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.